how is the situation post-pandemic? As we come out, we had gone into pandemic with lots of talk of the fourth industrial revolution, but as we come out of it, we've leapfrogged and catapulted several steps. So how do you view where we are now?
You know, I don't want to repeat what we all have been reading. All I can say is between 19 and 23, at least the host country, Dubai here, I think has probably added 5 new districts. And overall, I see the opportunities of UAE achieving their targets of industrialization, India continuing to grow, many countries in GCC being very, very upbeat.
But what's the downside?
I think it's more about the speed of execution, the infrastructure being ready, and the skill, because everything at the heart of this transformation is digital transformation. And digital transformation means the change is very rapid. Will the skills be able to keep up with it? Will we be able to? It's like semiconductor industry. We all know we need to decentralize. But will the equipment manufacturers be ready? Will the technicians be ready? So those are the challenges.
The challenges, George Oliver, are there. They also relate to the Director General of the WTO was talking about the need for supply chain diversification rather than just friendshoring or reshoring. But if you're talking about industrial resilience, isn't that what you have to do?
Absolutely. What we do in Johnson Controls is we support smart, healthy, sustainable buildings, and we do that globally with our people deployed locally. And for us, it's all about not only supporting the industrialization, but getting aligned to decarbonization of the globe. Buildings and infrastructure represent about 40% of the global carbon footprint. And so for us, it's all about electrification and digitalization. So in our equipment, we have all of the building systems within a building. So it's not only electrifying the equipment, but then deploying a digital platform that enables us to be able to get to an outcome that's much more significant than what historically has been achieved.
But as you try and plan to do that within your own company, the ability to have security of equipment, security of supply chain, security of availability.
That is a big deal with what we do, because it's not only how we work ourselves within our own framework, but how we support our customers with the most secure infrastructure from a cybersecurity standpoint. And then in today's world, we see digitalization with data to really be able to bring in the industrial piece of the economy to a whole new level. And that requires a lot of use of AI with the data that is ultimately going to get to outcomes in the buildings. By digitalizing a building, we can reduce the energy 30, 40, 50%. And so decarbonizing the world will depend on not only electrifying the equipment that gets deployed, but then being able to reduce the demand and replace the supply with renewable supply.
Ray Johnson, the other Johnson, or the first Johnson, from the Technology Innovation Institute. First question, though, have you used ChatGPT?
Yes.
You have?
I have used it. It's an amazing tool.
Have you? Let me find the next panel. Have you used it, Mr. Muller?
No.
Have you?
Yeah, sure.
You?
I have not, but I've had people use it on me. I mean, as far as putting together, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
Who in the room has used ChatGPT? Who in the room was impressed when they used it? Who in the room was horrified when they used it? And that's really the point, isn't it? I didn't know. I asked it to write a thank you letter to Mrs. Smythe Johnson, who doesn't exist, for a dinner party where the food was delicious, which never happened, and I was grateful that she didn't put too much garlic in the soup. And I was astonished with what it came up with.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool, and clearly it has many opportunities to make a huge difference as applied to a lot of areas. there are also a number of questions because as it learns and the regenerative feedback that it gets, we'll have an opinion. And so that opinion will be used as the basis for it making recommendations. So you have to be careful how you interpret the results, whether they have political sensitivities or cultural sensitivities, et cetera.
This has been, of course, the whole thing, everything from killer drones onwards, and all in its extremities. Do you see it as a quantum leap or a mere advancement?
No, I think it's a quantum leap. And let me kind of take that message to the message about the Industrialization 4.0 and the panel topic. I think you might blame Amazon or say gift Amazon for doing this, but the world has become very accustomed to just-in-time, tomorrow kind of deliveries. And you might say that there was maybe some analytics behind that, but actually the predictability behind that didn't come from analytics. It came from consistency. So the world was very repetitive. Everything was okay. It was very calm. And now enter COVID and enter some of the changes that we saw over the last 2 years and the disruptions in the supply chain, the companies going out of business, trade wars, et cetera. Now is the time, as Klaus Schwab said. I love the fact that he quoted his book, and you think about how old it is. But now is the time for Industry 4.0. Now is the time. We have the tools, as he rightfully said.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
It means that we use analytics to figure things out at a more detailed level. We now have the IoT devices. We have the analytic tools. We have ChatGPT. We have tools like this that can help us gain a better understanding of the real world, allow the suppliers to still operate globally, but do it in a smart way.
Yeah, Mولler, Director General of United Nations Industrial Development. I suspect you wouldn't disagree with any of that. The only problem is many of your members stand absolutely no chance of being on the front row.
This gentleman represents the world of digitalization, and I totally agree with you. Progress by innovation, that is my motto with UNIDO. We do have the solutions, we do have the technology, we do have the knowledge to solve the global challenges, but we do not have the political will, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the voice of the poorest, and one of the signals from this meeting must be, don't forget the situation and the people in the LDC countries. We talk about 4.0, but 1 billion people today, they do not have food, they do not have electricity, they do not have water. So what happens there, and what is the solution for this?
But you know jolly well that this is part of the solution 4.0 in the same way that the mobile telephone allowed those same countries to leapfrog the copper wire. The problem is either mismanagement or non-management of those countries means that they have not put themselves in a position.
I agree with you, but we have to do the first steps. We need to invest in infrastructure in these countries. Look, and what is the consequences of the global pandemic in these countries? They hit the poorest hardest, and there's no global solidarity. We ask for trillions of investments. Yes, the G20, they invested trillions in their own economy to support their own economy. And what did they do? They invested in their own economy, and they reduced the solidarity, the support for the LDCs, the support for development aid. That is the reality in the world.
Okay, so if we're not to widen the gap, which I suspect we will end up widening the gap, what is it you want?
I want global solidarity, a stronger commitment from the rich, from the industrialized countries in the least developed countries. Progress by innovation. We can come to a common solidarity. We are in an interconnected world, and that means responsibility even for the poorest of the poor.
If we talk about India, CP, I mean, software giant, but you're telling me there's still much work to do on the industrial basis.
So I mean, so first is let's react to, some of the disparities. Clearly, India, if I take it as just one example, so it's not that we do not have poor, we do not have unconnected villages, but what has happened is in the last 10 years, a determined government is trying to reach to the last mile. Now, I'm not saying all problems have been resolved. All I'm trying to make a point here is, A, if you know that it is connected world, and hence a solution has to be connected. And that connected solution to me is being able to know whom you want to address, whether it is a water issue, whether it's an energy issue, whether it is a food agricultural issue. There are issues to be addressed, but I think India has been able to prove it that this equation can only become better if you address it. The second part, which Richard, you talked about, industrialization. To me, the pride is that iPhone 14 is now manufactured in India. So the point I'm trying to make is that the two narratives, one is self-reliance, and number two is we need to take into account the resilience. And I think we are addressing it.
The only danger, of course, is when somebody else can produce the iPhone cheaper than you, and then it shifts.
I would like to believe that this is where the power of what I call the Detroit and Silicon Valley coming together, or a Bangalore of India and the hardware manufacturing coming together. Because we do both software and hardware, Johnson Controls also comes to India.
Sir?
So I would say, does AI bring it to the next level? For us within Johnson Controls, we have an incredible opportunity. A good example here in Dubai is the Dubai Energy and Water Authority. When you bring the public sector together with the private, we bring in innovation, investment, work together. The outcome is one of the smartest government buildings in the world that is the most sustainable. It's actually net positive energy while reducing about 50% of the water consumption. So I think for us, it's a space where it is important to be able to support getting to net zero, as we've made commitments both on the public side as well as on the private side, bringing those resources together, getting them aligned with the right policy and then the right financial incentives, and then working together is what you can. That's how you achieve outcomes that historically haven't been achieved.
Don't you think that the UAE and Dubai particularly, it is easier to do that because essentially you're dealing with Dubai Inc. Whereas, for instance, you end up in the morass of a PPP in the United Kingdom?
So what I would say is we're a company that we deploy locally, not only what we manufacture and the equipment and that we deploy, but then the innovation that we develop locally in the markets that we serve. And so we have innovation centers across the globe. We've localized our manufacturing and supply chain so we have more resiliency. And most important is creating privacy centers that you bring the public sector together with your partners. For instance, we were partnered with Microsoft, and you bring the partners together with the customer, with the public sector, and you ultimately get to the right answer that ultimately protects, the privacy at the same time that you're delivering outcomes that without digitalization you wouldn't be able to achieve. And so as we support a big part of the economy as well as the ability to be able to get net zero, buildings and infrastructure is going to play a very important role in being able to achieve that.
By the way, you used the word resiliency, as did I, and I think it's very important in supply chains. And I'd like to make a comment about the cheaper iPhone in India. I don't think it's necessarily, of course, cost matters, but I don't think it's necessarily the cheapness. I think it's the resiliency that was added to Apple's supply chain that drove that.
So
and
do
so
you
that
think
resiliency will continue to be important, and it will continue to drive Apple to use India and other countries more.
Do you think, in hindsight, the decision in China to shut down for so long and the way in which it did it has ultimately harmed the country in the perception of resilience? When you can no longer get your goods in and out.
I can't comment, I wouldn't comment on their policies, but I would say that the impact that the policies had on business led Apple to make certain decisions to enforce the need for resiliency.
So now you have got this, CP. What does India need to do to keep it? What investment needs to take place to ensure not just the resiliency, but also it's not a one-hit wonder?
I think, again, for India, I think we are fairly determined, ambitious, and we have stated our goals. Our goals that we want to be the third largest economy in the world. And as we all know, ultimately, the opportunity lies in leapfrogging. The opportunity lies when you start marrying people, processes, technology, and your ambitions together. And I do believe that many of the initiatives that are happening, a bilateral trade with UAE, a combination of various corridors being formed, like an I2, U2, which is Israel, India, US, and UAE. So I think there is a fundamental desire that whether it is pharmaceuticals, whether it is automobiles, or whether it is in electronic industry, I mean, there is a desire for us to leapfrog, become better, and
Can you be comfortable leapfrogging? Hasn't the rising tide got to lift all boats? And the provision of, as Gerd was saying, you know, the clean water for all, electricity 24/7, healthcare at a minimum standard. I understand it's not mutually exclusive. You can do both, but don't policymakers have to have an eye on both?
again, Richard, I mean, if you go back, India was able to vaccinate everybody. 2 billion vaccinations, and a vaccination which was also produced in India. It was, so my point is that it is not mutually exclusive. I think it's an inclusive development, and, unless you do business, you can't create jobs. And the reality is, India fully realizes that the rise of manufacturing is equal to addressing the employment needs of our people and their aspirational needs. So I think we are working together. If you look at the India stack, if you look at the fintech, India is one of the first countries to introduce digital currency.
Let me say again, there are 3 challenges. How to decarbonize? Is it possible to decouple economic growth and CO2 emission? Yes, it is possible. Progress by innovation, we do have the technology. The second is how to feed 10 billion people. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. It is possible with an investment of 50 billion over the next 10 years. But what is missing is the political will to do it. And the third is how to create hundreds of millions of jobs. That is the big challenges, and we do have the solutions. But what is missing is global solidarity, the rich with the poorest.
I want to end, gentlemen. Are you reading a book at the moment?
Not at the moment.
Right. Are you reading something at the moment?
No, I'm
not.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, I am.
Yes. Factfulness.
Sorry?
Factfulness.
Factfulness. And you're reading?
I'm reading a book called Extreme Ownership.
Oh, good grief.
It's written by the US Marines.
When you do read, do you read on an e-reader, on a Kindle, or do you like the crinkle of the page?
I like to crinkle up the page.
The book.
The e-reader.
Oh, no.
I mean, somebody has to be a little more progressive.
A real book in hand.
You're in the minority here, Steve.
Yeah, sure.
You're in the minority.
Yeah, because I'm the youngest
He's our
anyway.
digital leader.
You're the digital leader. Maybe
I'm
he'll...
the youngest here.
Ouch! That hurt. Ladies and gentlemen, it may be accurate. Oh, panel. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.